Recording is in progress.
Yeah. So
Hi.
hi, Danielle. We're laughing because even though we were recently talking about some of the what can feel like deeper, darker, or more profound issues that can predominate our experience or mindsets, we wanted to touch on some of the amazing things that can also happen once we start to apply some of the, whether you call it personal development, spiritual tools, or whatever. And I don't know if you know this, but because I wrote a few blogs, I think a few years ago when I was doing my trips to Italy and France and stuff, and I remember thinking about self-development and whether or not, I think like a lot of people, you go on that journey, you pay for all these courses and you read all these articles and you consciously do X, Y, and Z in order to feel better, do better, or whatever. And you don't necessarily know that you're really getting any true benefit of that, because we don't always know that we're growing in that process. But I did get to a phase where I did read this guy's article who was saying what I was thinking, which was, it's really at any point to any of this stuff or all this professional, personal development, all that. So I wrote to him and I said, well, I think we probably get to a phase where we think we've probably learned a lot of the stuff, but we can start to put the books down or start to turn off the recordings or whatever, and start to maybe just apply some of that from day to day, the tools in our lives, and start thinking about, if we're not sure what we want to create. Because if you have done a lot of work on yourself and you've already become aware of what your trigger points are, what maybe some, and this is unfolding, we've talked about this before, it's layers. I still get a call on the tap on the shoulder and I go, oh my goodness, something else has come up that I need to look at and attend to, and that's part of being human. But on the same vein of that path, we also have what sometimes can start to look like beautiful moments, magical experiences, or just brighter, happier days. Sometimes the balance between the two, of moving from being consistently depressed and anxious and scared and fearful and overwhelmed, and that can be someone's experience every day. And you've been there and I've been there. We've been under the covers and lived in a depressive state. Certainly after my first child, I can certainly record 8 months of crying and then another 2 years of trying to keep it together and responding and being overwhelmed and all of those things. And I still sometimes can't figure out what the hell brought all that on. But, we can go into that at another stage. And you've been there and you've been under the covers and you've been ill and you've had these traumatic experiences as well. But since we've met, we've also been talking about the days that are brighter, where we laugh and it's happier and it's more joyous and it's lighter, and also how does our environment also, besides what we were talking about last time, indicate where we're at, what phase are we in, or how are we getting feedback from our environment that something is going okay. And sometimes we don't notice that because either the filters are blocked, the glasses are smeared, and we're just not tuning into that. And
because you're very laser focused when you feel these darker moments or this darker existence where there's not really, you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's no light on the outside of that egg. It is all dark, it's under the butt of mama and you can't find nothing that resembles light. But and so to receive love seems like the easiest thing to do, but it's, as a traumatized, which I'm going to be very clear, I feel like if you are alive in this world, that you've existed in some form of trauma, or you've witnessed some form of trauma that stuck to you in some way. But it's easy to not receive love when you are in a dark place, and everybody tells you just be open to receiving love, but the key to that is it starts within you. You have to find that way to, once you hit neutrality, now it's time to start liking yourself. And then once you start liking yourself again, you know, even when you turn it to neutrality, you start to notice that these things that once were such a negative interaction are more of a neutral interaction. Yeah. And then when you begin to like yourself, you realize that you don't put up with even the neutrality interactions. And then once you begin to love yourself, you won't put up with anything that isn't for your highest self or your highest purpose, what you see yourself as in the future. And in return, the universe reflects that right back to you, and allows that love to start pouring in, and you start noticing it in the mundane that you wouldn't have noticed before.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like literally something flying past you, or you receive a confirmation.
I want you to tell the bee story, because that was so fun.
So because of the projects I'm working on at the moment, is one of the other things I have discovered, because you know, these phrases that we tell ourselves, and mine was, you know, I've never been able to draw, but I have over the years, when I've tried to demonstrate things and deliver training, would draw stickmen. And if people aren't familiar with stickmen, I refer to Lowry, who was a British artist going back, I don't know, I think the 1940s maybe, that used to draw these drab scenes of darkened skies in these stickmen, which was sort of representative at the time of the industrial age and the sort of 9 till 9 work patterns. So I've always been able to draw a few stickmen. Anyway, in this process of trying out something different, really, is I bought myself a beautiful box by accident. You know, like you go on, let's not name the shopping site, to buy something, and it then comes up with all these other ideas, and one of them was quite a good idea, because it was a big box of different pens and pencils, and some was oil colors and some was watercolors. And I've avoided buying anything like this over the years because of this concept of I can't draw, I can't do this. But I thought, no, I'm going to, because some of them you can get these doodle pads that are already set out, you just colour them in. And we know in psychology that even just taking out the colours, scribbling or whatever, can just be a really nice way of moving your mindset from the place that it's stuck in, and then doodling or colouring. And it can just be it can be a really profitable way of processing something really deep without really having to put much effort or attention into it. Or you can just enjoy the art, or it's known art therapists. I had an art therapist working for me once, and it was a way to give language to a landscape or an internal world that the child was struggling with, without having the words in which to label it, because they didn't have access to that language. And that's what happens often with trauma, is if it happens at the pre-verbal stage, then there is no language to be able to articulate what your experience has been. And doing it through art in any form, and if you're like me and you can't really draw, so I've sort of been playing around with this as a sort of, like a lot of people during the global pandemic that's been going on, playing around with the sort of ideas of trying different things, trying new things. And also, as part of the yoga, you'd have to sort of get stickmen and join them up, because I'd be creating a series to teach people to do. So I was using these stickmen all the time. So I got myself this really nice art box, and a few days after work, I set myself a goal of, right, it's the end of the day, shift the focus between work and non-work, because I can get a bit obsessive, and get the pens out and just draw and come up with stuff. Then I started working on this project where I'm creating this course. It's a program for women who've experienced domestic abuse. It's a wellbeing program. We're going to have a range of courses and a range of group work and one-to-one support that's going to be going in. So I'm just working on a small aspect of that. And what I wanted to do was just really, I've been thinking about the themes that emerge for people who are moving out of a situation that has been really stressful, violent, on whatever level, whether it's the small day-to-day indiscretions and ways that people will treat each other that sometimes you don't even capture, to the very obvious violent, aggressive scenarios that people have been living in for whatever time period. And we're thinking we're working on something to help somebody move out of that process and stay out of that and move forward in their lives. So we're looking at transition. So I was sat down today with I bought myself, because one of the nice things to do is, going back to your point about self-care and loving yourself, is actually to get yourself some things that you enjoy using. So I like the pens, and I bought myself these mega art pads rather than the other pads I was using, because it just seems to add to the experience of it. So I also decided to change my routine and go out in the morning when the light's really nice and take a walk around the corner to the coffee shop and get the pad out. So I've done that a few times now. And the ideas, and the thing is when you start to draw things, is that you can, just by the very process of doing that and tapping into that, it's almost like your mind starts to get a message that the information, the insight, and the inspiration will start to come. So I've noticed that the more that I've applied these techniques, the more I've found it becoming more fluid. The information's just been flowing. And so part of taking that walk, going out in the sun and sitting somewhere and having a coffee and then taking your pad, rather than what I did in the past, my laptop and write stuff. And that's what I was doing. So I was creating these images. So I showed you the sort of pad earlier, but I'd created an image with this workshop in mind about breaking free and moving out of the prison of the mind, the prison of the experience, or the prison of the relationship, whatever, whether we use that as a real point in time or as a metaphor, and starting to draw like a cloud in the sky. So on the pad, I had this cloud in the sky where we visualize all of the desires that we've had. Or for some people, we assist them to start to generate some idea about desires. And that can be simple things like, I want to grow plants, I want to have a dog, I want a house that looks like this. And a bit like what I do after work, where I get my notepad out and start drawing in there. The process is about moving from the fearful state's mind into, what is it I want to visualize? What is it I really want? What is it I would like to bring into my world? And you said on several occasions, that the people that you were around when you were in your darkest hour weren't always healthy for you. And so it's, if it's not those people, what kind of people do we want? We want people that value us, that listen to us. We want to value ourselves and listen to ourselves and all of that sort of thing. So that's what I'd done anyway. So this is all the backdrop to just going there this morning. So I've drawn this nice cloud with all this nice imagery in it as a nice visual that I want to put on the training program, because imagery captures people's attention, just like TV can captivate people in the wrong ways. Imagery and art can captivate us in a really positive way and start a process that could be out of our awareness. And we were talking about what you become aware of and what you're not aware of. So I kind of know what I'm doing and I'm enjoying the process. So I'm sat there, and then all of a sudden this huge bee, the size of probably a third of my finger or whatever, lands on the page and sits right in this bubble where I've created all of the dreams.
The bubble that looks like a thought bubble.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of fascinated by that. And I think we've talked in the past, haven't we, about I did a little bit. I dived into shamanism a few years ago, and I'd experienced some shamanic practices. And I know that animal totems and animals can be symbolic as meaning something. So I knew that I could look this up and see. And I didn't at the time because I was drawing and I was trying to avoid getting on the technology. and reading information on my phone because I thought, no, I'm in this process. But it sat on the pad, landed right on this corner in this thought bubble.
Surrounded by the family.
The family, the trees,
yeah,
the flowers, the happy dog, all of the imagery that, you know, our ideal minds might conjure
the creation imagery.
The creation. Yeah, what we're creating.
Yeah. And you have a gift of a bee, which we already know is part of the creation, the pollination that carries
pollinating ideas.
Yeah. And so, you know, for that moment to happen for you is, we talk about receiving love from spirit back. I think that that would be, for me personally, such an amazing like affirmation that my thoughts and what I'm trying to do and create, or in other words, pollinate, is literally being told yes, like a huge yes from spirit through one of, you know, what I would consider one of our most favorite creations, which is the beautiful fat bottom fuzzy butted bee. So,
which interestingly, you know, you went to that space straight away to say, wow, this is huge. And I'm like, is it? You know, I thought, well, it was quite a clever bee to land on that part of the page and then just sit there and wasn't even bothered that there was a human about, you know, a foot.
There's nothing to pollinate there. Why would it sit there?
maybe the tree and the flower that I drew
looked very familiar, and it was like, I'm coming here.
But again, it's like sometimes when you're so wrapped up in the things that aren't working or that aren't, you know, going right, and there's been a barrage of those, or you've spent time overwhelmed, and you can get into that mindset of it's not working out, this self-development stuff I'm doing is not working, all this spiritual stuff I'm doing not's working. And there can be signs all around in your environment. You know, for some people that's numbers, and for some, like today, you were seeing the bee, and there can be signs there, can't there, that indicate it's like an affirmation or a confirmation.
It's a confirmation or affirmation, whichever way. And it just helps when you begin to open your eyes to the magic that this universe offers, because let's face it, we can't really decide how we got here, what created us, any of that. Nobody knows this, right? So for me, the whole universe, the way it's created is straight up magic. This is just beautiful magic coming to life in a very materialized form. And whenever the universe, I think they say art is when you listen to the universe, and magic is when the universe responds. And so for me, it's every time that I feel the universe, I keep my eyes open for the universe responding. It's always telling you that you're in alignment and you are walking the correct steps. And unless it's a warning sign, then it's like, hey, trigger. And, and then you typically are like, okay, I either need to heal that trigger, or I'm the fool walking right in, or you're like, I use that trigger in the same way that some people use the, you know, these shadow animals, and say like, okay, I know to stay away from that. Yeah.
But the feeling, actually, that's a really good point, because the feeling between the two, the more you practice stepping back and observing, or experiencing the trigger and curiously looking at that, is the experience between the two were very different, because I was sat there really content, really in the moment, enjoying the fact that I was working, but at the same time didn't feel I was working. That's the best time to work.
It is the best time. You know? Absolutely.
And I was in that space until I noticed that actually the cars that circle the coffee shop that I was in were leaving the engines on, and I started to get drawn into the, you know, but I was peaceful and calm, and the sun was out, and actually the weather forecast said it was going to be cloudy. So I thought maybe that's rain. And again, I chose to utilize the time. Because in the past, what I was doing, I was holding off till, say, the afternoon or tomorrow or the weekend before I would do that kind of walk, before I'd sit down. But it was an instant decision, and it sort of reminds me of the 5-second rule, which Mel Robbins, I think it is, in her book, when I first read that a few years ago. and I've said to you as well, is sometimes I deliberate way too much and I procrastinate, or I don't come up with an answer when actually my system has done that. And this morning I asked myself, what shall I do? Because I wake up really early and I'll do my yoga, I'll do a bit of meditation, and I've still got an hour before I need to log on for work, and things are starting to open up. Or I can log on somewhere else because I can work in different locations. So it's, what do I want to do next? And I look out the window. Oh, it's really nice. I can walk around the corner because I don't want to drive everywhere. So this is all pleasure, 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 pleasure. I can walk around the corner. It's sunny, pleasure. I can go and have a coffee. I look forward to a super hot latte, and it's the build up, it's the layers of pleasure, which is
it's the layers of pleasure of self-care. Yeah, because self-care comes in all forms, and
exactly,
part of that is getting out in the nature. But you followed your intuition. Your body said, hey, I would like to do something a little different today, and change the time up of when you normally do your nature activities. And then because you followed that line and that pattern, you opened up this beautiful space for yourself to create. And then the universe came in with a little fat bottom bee and said, hey, by the way, good idea. Great idea. And because what you're doing is brilliant. And I love that the universe is responding that. And the fact that you're even getting, even if it didn't immediately connect that it was a gift from the universe or some form of magic from the universe, it did stop you long enough to say, wait a minute, I'm going to take a picture of this bee that's landed on, this sacred space I'm working in. And, even if it comes of nothing, the magic in itself is the fact that you even noticed it, right? That you even said, oh, whoa, that's weird. Let me get a picture of that. Tells you that you are in the moment, you are being guided. And even if you're not consciously receiving the love in that moment, you're unconsciously receive that love, and that love is sitting in there just like delicious and yummy, and the universe is just excited that you saw it.
And like you say, I took the picture, and then I only, and this is the interesting thing about what you take a picture of, because you've done photography as well, is, as you can see, the whole of my pad is big, but I only took a picture of this part.
So and this is just like what, and a 2 inches by 2 inches space on this long legal pad.
Yeah,
it's like a legal pad size, which is what, 9 by 11.
Yeah,
and then isn't it 9 by 11? I think. Anyways, then it's it's 11 by 14, or I don't know. It does not matter.
A4.
But then in this little 2 by 2 circled space. And the part where you literally were talking about creating an idea. Right. The part where a person visualizes
like a helicopter that lands perfectly.
Yes. And it just landed right in the middle of it, showing all of it. You don't have to believe in any of the magic part. You don't have to believe that the universe speaks back to you to know that something wonderful happened. And even if all you believe in is nature, which I'm a firm believer that nature is our church, that this little bee, this thing that has a million things to do all day long, chose to land on the specific piece of the paper. And that in itself is so beautiful that even if it has no other meaning on top of it, even if there's nothing beyond that,
it just landed on that.
Right. You created this beautiful, profound moment of a bee sitting on your ideas.
Yeah. And then when I took a picture of it, and the reason I'm talking about the size of the pad is I then sent the picture to a colleague and a couple of family members. And then they said, so what is that drawing? So I then took a picture of the whole pad so they could see it in context.
Right.
Because then they didn't realize.
You didn't draw that on a little napkin and it landed on the napkin. No, you drew this on this huge piece of paper
that had a load of other images on
a lot of things.
The journey. Yeah. Then I'm saying to them what the journey is. I said, oh, what I'm doing is I'm drawing imagery and pictures to indicate that you move out of this zone. So this is the negative, the not feeling good, the dangerous, the harmful, whatever zone, whatever level of what that not nice zone is, moving that into the better zone. So they got the picture and they couldn't understand, what's all this little stuff in this bubble? And then I said, no, this is what is part of the bigger picture. And so that's the other sort of metaphor in this, isn't it? It's what else, what is it? My focus was drawn to that one part of the paper because that's where the bee landed. My focus was there. Everything else disappeared for me and the people that I sent it to.
Yeah.
Then I had to fill in the blanks and say, no, this is actually part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, like, I am just, and it is, and and to be open to receiving any of this tells you where you are on your path, right?
Well, it did you, because you're like, wow, this is cool. This is,
Listen, lady, it did you as well, because you sent me the picture knowing your spiritual ass friend looking at this is going to be like, did you see the magic? There's magic. Did you see the magic?
Well, I just thought it's magic that he'd landed on his helipad, which was,
right? That in itself is magical. But if you, and then as you said, you had researched some of the totems and understood that there is these different type of animals or insects in nature that are very big in the spiritual community. They represent such beautiful things. I mean, we can talk about, the basic ones like a cardinal arriving at your in your yard, at your door, in front of you, showing up in any way is usually a sign of the ancestors or a loved one that's passed away. And it's like their message to you. And this is widely regarded even in religious standpoints, where they talk about, nature is part of the magic that makes up this universe. And so, I had to know that you're in a part to where you can even want to take the picture tells you that you're in a place of receiving. Because if you hadn't taken the picture and you mentioned it by the wayside as we were having a different conversation, obviously the magic loses its effect because you're now just talking about it, right? And it's like oh, so this happened to me, right?
The picture itself made it real to everybody else as well,
so
didn't it?
What you're saying is that you're not receiving and that you needed me to call it magic, but I was just affirmation to the magic you were already seeing. I verbalized what you already knew inside of you. And and that's just what I do. I'm the verbalizer of, hey, by the way, that's not normal. That's magical.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying on that other podcast where we're looking at the sort of deeper, darker aspects of trauma, is that when you've got somebody around in your environment, so like you said, you notice that. So I've looked at shamanism and animal totems and know that they can be seen as having a particular meaning. And I was curious, and it's a beautiful state to be in. And a real contrast, almost like the picture depicts, last week when I was experienced really, when I said I had a curveball come where I had a letter from my solicitor to do with a car accident I'd had. And I had this curveball come in and my whole system is absolutely flooded by all of these stress chemicals to the point that I'm almost immobilized. So then in less than sort of 4 days.
The OODA loop hit freeze.
The OODA loop. Right, there you go. Yeah. Whoever coined that phrase, we're now using that.
I'm now using it because I love the word. It's a very creative word.
Yeah, rather than triple F, fight, flight, or flee.
Triple F. I don't know. That sounds dirty. Where's your mind, Mel?
Your mind.
I'm in the gutter. As
my
usual.
Mind is on the helipad with the
I'm 12 years old at heart.
Well, that's the thing, you see, Stickmen and people. Although I did colour in some items of clothing this time, but so the process again of we were talking about an aspect we were reflecting on, and we equally want to give value to the positive experiences that people can experience without sounding like we're just focusing on positive psychology or pop psychology. Positive spiritual experiences. Yeah. As well as entertaining and embracing and being able to go deep and into those really dark crevices of the human psyche and the human experience. And what's fascinating by this is that depending on the state that you're in when the experience occurs, because if we look at this from an existential point of view, whatever appears in your environment we will apply some meaning to it. Now, we were
Absolutely.
in a similar space in terms of meaning, but I didn't give it the level of sort of credence initially. I was interested in it, but my internal state was open, receiving, and receptive
Yeah.
in each moment of that experience, and a very different internal state to the one I was in, where I felt almost paralyzed last week with indecision, overwhelm, and where I'd been triggered left, right, and center, and my whole system was going through a massive wave of those chemicals that flood your
Yeah.
system,
The trauma
rendering it.
induced physiological
Yeah,
responses. Yeah.
this is as chalk and cheese as it gets, and yet that equally, what am I trying to say? It's like you give equal value to both. So when I really don't like going through those experiences, but at the
No.
same time, it took me to a deeper place because it's actually fed into prompting some of the ideas that I had. I think I told you about for this
Yeah.
workshop,
Well,
because it's
that shadow work was part of your creativity. Just
yeah,
like with my photography, when I was using
yeah,
it as shadow work
yeah,
to get out of this beauty, like you drawing on pieces of paper, right?
projecting,
Yeah,
yeah,
projecting this beauty. It was helping me unravel things on a level that I wasn't even consciously aware of
yes,
until I used the hindsight rule and looked back at it.
yeah,
And so,
yeah,
but yeah, so but we do have a tendency to look at the dark, give more credence to the darker stuff, because
yeah,
we are both light and dark, but it's easier to stick in the darker realms and let those be the things that kind of create this experience. And that, especially when you're inside of it, of course. And then, when the lighter things come around, it's like, oh, yay, 5 seconds of my day, right? And then it gets washed away with all the other 5 seconds good parts of your day because these overwhelming or traumatic or negative experiences happened.
yeah. And
Yeah.
interestingly, because I think a lot of us who have pursued, some spiritual, psychological, personal self development or whatever, are aware of the law of attraction and the notions behind that. And one of the things I remember early on, and it's interesting because, I'd referred to some of the sticky situations I've had recently with new professionals I've come into contact with. Well, the original time, and again, it's nothing like the time back then, but the
Right.
original time is I purposely played because I knew this was a tool that was helping me, but on a really extreme, almost obsessive compulsive level, played all of these different loops of listening to all the different people in the field that talk about the Greg Badens or all the different people do law of attraction, The Secret, What the Bleep, um, spiritual speakers. But I played it all because I didn't have the strength and the internal mobilization that I needed. So I needed the external to become such a strong loop that it would keep playing while I then went and faced my day. And,
Right.
so
And
I, d-
that's good because then it comes to the point where you don't, I don't remember if we were talking about this episode or the last one, but because then it gets to the point where you have started to
integrate that.
internalize this,
Yeah.
enough. And now you're
Yeah.
putting it into action that you don't need to
Yeah.
listen to those because now you're trusting yourself more, you're guiding yourself more. You don't
Or
have to
it just,
externalize it.
yeah, because often what I've come across as well, and I remember discovering this as well about myself, is internal looping can be a really positive experience or a disastrously difficult bad experience.
Yes.
And so one of the things I practiced, I came across something again, probably around this time period, when I was having to get more and more extreme methods to cope with the extreme environment I was working in,
Mhm.
because it was extreme trauma and stress. It was a very toxic environment.
Right.
So
Well, and
I
you're
did
already working in an environment where the people coming to you are under extreme trauma and
well.
distress.
the clients were easier than the professionals. So
Well,
the
yeah,
systems
but like you are literally here to
yeah,
help, and then you're like, I'm in need
yeah,
of help because the experiences I'm
yeah,
having are traumatic and
yeah.
distressful. Yeah, yeah,
So when that builds up to that stage, I recognized that I was bringing these on much more fuller. You know, I was
yes, yeah.
harnessing them every day. And some of the things I was listening to, what I learned in that is that it's very hard to switch off the negative thinking once you've allowed the first thought, the second thought, the third thought, and
Yeah.
you end up in these loops.
Well, because now you're in the pattern.
Because you're in the pattern and you can get stuck in that, especially when there's strong emotions associated with it, because your internal thoughts can be saying, you know, why did this happen, why did she say that, why did I do that, you know, in this internal loop kicks off. Now what I discovered, it was what was being said at the time, you have about 18 seconds before you're like hooked in. So I became aware of trying to break the pattern before
Hmm.
it got got hooked in.
Right,
So I was practicing that, but what I was practicing wasn't really giving me the results I wanted. So I
right.
found this information from another woman that I was Jennifer. Oh God, Jennifer Elizabeth. Her name will come to me in a minute. That I found online, and she had this mini course, and on one of the weeks she taught you to do this mantra, and it sits in with sort of Vedic philosophy and yoga to some degree, but I wasn't practicing yoga anyway to the degree that I do now. And it's a bit, you know, if you've seen those mala beads that you know, the chains that a lot of gurus wear, the beads.
Hmm.
So I think it's 108 beads that you get on this. And
Yeah.
what she said to do, and I set this up for 30 days. I challenged myself and thought, I'm going to do this for 30 days. And I'm going to see what happens whilst being in the midst of this really crazy stuff that was going on, because I was kind of just trying to survive it. I wasn't looking for the blissful, joyful experiences.
Right,
They had been colored out of this picture.
right. There was no thriving in this
There was
situation.
no thriving.
Right.
This was just about surviving and keeping your head above water in a shark tank,
Yeah.
basically, because the
Yeah.
shark tank
While
was going
carrying a
down.
meat suit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what happens. And I knew that. And again, it's the human nature, but it was how I was surviving and sustaining myself in that process. So I started every morning to get up, and it started off with 3 different mantras, and it often doesn't matter what the mantra is that you use, because the power of placebo is really important to understanding
Yes.
this. But if you go to a guru and he says, if you say this mantra, this is linked with your name and your birth, and you that connects with you, then you use that. If it's a mantra which is what I found fit for me, rather than saying I love me, or whatever, at the time I was struggling to say things like that, was to instead say, you know, I'm getting better and better and stronger and better at this each day. So something that was a process sort of statement that
Yeah.
I could
Part of
align
the journey.
part
Yeah.
of the journey. It was
You're doing your journey walk. I'm walking myself to neutrality before I walk myself into liking, before I walk
yeah.
myself into loving.
So I
Yeah.
knew, yeah, so it was like transitional language, and I knew I could connect with that. So I started this process, and using the mala beads, and would say it over and over and over again. And it took, I think, about 20 or 30 minutes. And it did get hard, because like anything, you know, when we start doing it, we're all ready and gusto and everything to do it. And after about day 3 or 4, you're like, oh gosh, you
Right.
know, I've
Now
got
it's a
20 minutes
chore.
of this.
Yeah.
But I committed to it. Now, what was interesting, I can't remember whether this was day 10 or something, but I used to have a 50-minute drive to work. So I'd get up, and in the car, I still had the record playing in my head of the mantra. So what it prevented is, one, it created a very powerful focus for me to have on positive things and affirmations that I was saying that I could connect with. But it was almost like having a security guard in your head that went, nothing else is coming in here, love, you know,
I
no
like that.
negative thoughts.
Yeah, because I just watched a new Disney movie called Luca.
Right.
And in it, it's the guy, this kid looks at him and he says, "That's just your Bruno." And the Bruno's like his negative Nancy, right? And so he's like, Silencio, Bruno, Silencio. And so that became their protective pattern is saying Silencio, Bruno. But it's like the opposite. Now Bruno is this protector and Bruno is protecting you and Bruno's your security guard. And Bruno's silencing anybody that
you're not getting in because you're low frequency, put bad vibe, or gonna upset the equilibrium, which is a sort of masterful state that many of us need to get to, because I remember doing some work with this organization called the Human Givens in London, and they were training up therapists in quite a different approach. But one of the things that they taught people to think about was how the brain and body work and how stress mechanisms work, and how to start talking with clients about what is happening to them when they get in these stress states and what the processes are involved. And what they were saying with things like addiction is that internal loop and that thought pattern that goes around that forces you to, feels like a really strong impulse to go and do something or score or whatever, is because you've got the security guard doing a different job. The security guard is part of the brain's function that says, you're running out of that stuff that makes you feel good, right? Because that's the stuff that you think is the only thing responsible.
Because Bruno, being a good security guard, is not necessarily the smartest security guard.
Yeah, but also Bruno was only instructed, you see, to tell you that when your meter goes down, because this happens with people who stop smoking as well, when the meter goes down in your system and those chemicals that have been creating this state, this desired state or whatever, and this is how they explained it, and I thought it was a really beautiful sort of, again, metaphor of how the brain can work. And the security guard's job was to protect you, because you're not going to be safe anymore if you're now getting aroused and angry and agitated. So the way to change the agitation and the anger was to have some to smoke or illicit drugs or whatever the thing is that you were seeking. But in a way, the process is similar in that, you know, you can end up in these mental loops that can literally drive some people insane because they're so powerful.
They are powerful.
I recognized mine were incredibly powerful, and it felt like the grip, you know, the grip was really tight, and I don't know what that was about, and it got harder and harder to release that grip. So I had to up the ante and create a process, and it was fascinating to experience, because I remember saying to colleagues afterwards, this is a kind of process that if you've got, say, like some compulsive obsessive thinking styles, let's have a think about the material that we give it instead. Don't just try and end up with, you know, like some people are told when they meditate, people will say to me, I can't meditate because, you know, I still keep thinking. And I'm like, well, of course I still think, I still have millions of thoughts passing through my head. It is an art form. That's, you know, mastery is about trying to manage
exactly. And it's it is. Well, and what that reminded me of is that story of the two wolves inside of you, and which one succeeds, and it's the one you feed. You know, the wolf that you feed. You have a light wolf and a dark wolf, and even though it's easier to feed the dark wolf because the dark wolf wants to eat everything it can get its hands on, and the light wolf is more of the polite wolf, you know, you have to purposefully feed that light wolf the food that the dark wolf is so eagerly going to take from you.
And you're usually people just say get rid of the bad wolf, don't they? They just say, oh, clear that one out of the way.
That makes you a little less than whole, and we're here trying to be whole.
Exactly.
Again, we're no, you know, love and light spiritual people. We're here to have that conversation about what makes you an entire being, a whole being, and that includes that dark stuff. But you're also reminding me of my first mantra, and it was, I am love, I flow love. I am love, I flow love, because I was lacking love in my life, and because I wasn't receiving it. I wasn't.
But how did you feel when you started doing that? Because I think sometimes if you've not experienced that in life, when I've noticed this, is if somebody says, look in the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself, or use a mantra that is, I am love. Some people really struggle to even start doing that. So was it like that for you?
No, I think for me, it was, my journey has all been about empowerment. right? I've always loved myself. I've always known that I was a good person. And even though I made my own mistakes and I was not perfect, I've never had the unfortunate, thought patterns. It's like, you're unlovable, you're not a good person, any of that. So because I always knew, even as a child, that the things that were happening were not normal, that wasn't okay, and that things like that were, like, even as an adult, even when I was conditioned to believe otherwise, something in me always knew that I was valid and that I was worthy of love, and that people just weren't seeing it. But whenever you talk to, I've actually had people counteract the I am love, I flow love. I don't love myself. And this is where my neutrality statements come from all the time. Is it's okay for you not to feel like you're loved. So be neutral. Let's find a neutral statement. If you can't say I am love, I flow love, which at the end of the day, for me, we are love. And
but we have a different understanding of it.
We have a different understanding. Yeah.
It's not in the truest sense of it.
Exactly.
This is the Hollywood romantic love.
That's we're thinking the conditioned love, the love with expectation, the love that requires all of these different working parts. Yeah. And so for me, it was just simply part of that empowerment movement for me, which was, I am love. I come from love. I will return to love. Right. Therefore, I flow love. Everything in me is the flow of love. And I was just trying to, looking back in the hindsight rule, I'm trying to open and activate my chakra system to flow through my body in an energetic way. And again, because I know that we come from love, that this is just a natural way for me to activate that chakra system. And I didn't know anything at the time. You know what I mean? Like, this was like more of it felt right to say it. So I said it and I repeated it. And then one day I was like, I can take on a new affirmation. I am love and I flow love.
Yeah.
And now I'm ready for a new affirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And you know what? I think that leads beautifully into the meditation that you said you were going to do for us.
Yeah, I said I was going to do it. I made a mistake and did not write down my angels I wanted to work in with this meditation. And so for now, if you don't mind, I'm going to record that separately.
Okay.
So that I can go ahead and get that, because I wrote down the colors, the I am statements, and then left out my angels.
So it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. And I don't know what happened with the day. I woke up on time. It was 6:30 a.m. I woke up, and then all of a sudden it was time for me to set up for this podcast, and I was running completely short of time. So it's fine. I know it's fine. I'm sure that there's something that's bridging on that I'm waiting to be in alignment with before I.
Well, we often do. Yeah, no, that's cool, because we often do the meditations as separate ones anyway, in case people.
Right. And normally I can do it off the cuff, and it's like the way I've been teaching myself how to do this guided meditation, because of course I'm not trained in any of this. I'm just following my intuition. But for whatever reason, I know that in this one specific, I need my angels to come in and protect the chakra system I'm going to be working in through the I am statements. Yeah. And so that's just lack of planning on my part. So.
No, but that is also what we're demonstrating, is that, often we do this as a, the information just comes to us, doesn't it, when we're doing it. And we've both thought a little bit about the different experiences that we've had over the last few weeks.
Well, yeah, because everybody's been dealing with trauma. So the trauma meditation had less to do with us wanting to do it on here, and more along it needs to be done. And we needed to have a trauma meditation for people, so that, because I went through, and the way that you research, obviously is, through you follow people that are very in tune with psychology and understanding of it. And then you follow people that are very in tune spiritually. And I like to kind of see, and then the way I do it is kind of like to see how other people are doing it, and then say, that's not going to work, or that one piece is really amazing. I'm going to take that piece and use it and create my own, around this little 30-second blurb of guided meditation. And so what I noticed when I was listening to these trauma-based meditations is I didn't like them. I didn't like how they felt. They didn't feel like they were working on the trauma. It was more like I felt surface level, I guess is the way I would put that. And when it comes to trauma, I've noticed from my personal experiences, and I'm not saying this is for anything other than what my personal experiences are, is getting to the root of that trauma. It might hurt, but it's like ripping a Band-Aid. And once that Band-Aid's off, you can allow that the stuff to kind of ooze out, to seep out, to start cleaning itself out. And so the way I'm wanting to do it is working through not just the root chakra, but taking to the root of each chakra that we have and pulling that out so where we can start to uncover it and to work through the trauma, as opposed to just putting a little bit of, medication on it and then hoping it heals.
I think what you're indicating, though, and this is what we've both expressed, is and I think we covered it a little bit when we were talking earlier, is there's a lot of information out there. And whether that is on spirituality or psychology or religion or whatever, when we want to research, and I've made this mistake in the past, because also within my field, there are varying levels of what is seen as credible research, and even something that initially can look like a really good, piece of information on whatever topic I'm looking at, that I've still got to step back and think, okay, I can use that information, but again, like the picture on my pad, that's often only one aspect of a much bigger picture. So you will often get people who will either research a particular angle on something, and the outcomes for that is relevant, but it might only be relevant with that group of people who lived at that time period in that area of that part of the country. Or there is information that is replicable, and sometimes that's what research says, is you can use that with, 500,000 people over there, but I think you can use it over here as well. But that's the sort of big picture stuff. When you take it back to the individual, what you're saying in terms of your journey, and I say in my journey, I can look at lots of different information, and I can test out ideas, and you can put anything in Google and have ideas come up. And I think I said this to you the other day, that I learned about trauma and what are now known as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. 5 years ago, I learned about child sexual exploitation. 10 years ago, prior to that, totally unaware of it. I learned about domestic abuse when I was growing up, because it was in our community. I learned about drug addiction growing up. It was in our community, in our family. Alcoholism was in our family. All of those things. So you can learn some of those things through personal experience, but that's still my corner of the world. Or you can learn it later on through something that you're reading. But the thing is these things are multi-layered, and I will occasionally get information that at that time serves a purpose, but at another time I need to get a different bit of information or go a bit deeper, or I'm now ready. And like I said to you last week, I knew a couple of years ago when I had the car accident that all of a sudden, if you visualize a washing line, and instead of hanging up loads of T-shirts on that line, I've got pictures of every other traumatic experience I've had, have now been reeled in and stacked up into this one experience. I was aware of that, but I'm still deepening my understanding each time.
It's a spiral. It is not a circle.
Yeah. About what that now is like for me. And I used to frame the experience I had last week, because that was a curveball, but it was a strong trigger. I used to frame that as anxiety. I used to have these panics and anxieties, in particular when I started a job once. I think I told you that. But actually didn't realize what was being re-triggered is when I left the work situation that I was in that was very toxic. I thought it's a bit like you think you're going to get up, dust yourself down, like you get out of a car accident, you get up, you dust yourself down, and you know that within the first week or two you're a bit dazed and you're getting over your injuries, and then you should be okay. I approach pretty much everything in life like that. And I did with the work situation, but what I'd forgotten or didn't want to take into account either way, it'd been long and enduring. The car accident was a one-off, you know, and that was something that shook up the whole system, that my system then had to process, and I had to heal, and I'm still healing from that. The work situation was long and enduring, and it's whether it's a work situation that is toxic, a relationship that's toxic. It was probably I think it was about 10 months that some of the really serious stuff that was going on, and I couldn't ever get an end to it. And I was trying to get support and all of that. So that's when you go into, you've no control, you can't control anything, you don't know when the outcome's going to be, you don't know when it's going to end, and that pervasive, long enduring, can't see an end to anything, in a way, I'm not saying it's different, I can't quite articulate, but it's a sort of different experience on the body. So when I left there and 3 months later went into another job, the anxiety I was having, I thought was associated with the fact that I was just starting a new job, and it wasn't. It was much more than that.
It was much deeper than that.
It was much deeper than that. It was the after effects. And a bit like the child, like you talked earlier, that if my new boss had any expressions or any ways of being that was similar to the experience that I'd had in my previous place, it really triggered me again, and I have to try and manage that.
It sends you right back to that space. It's like you're on that timeline all over again.
Yeah. And I would be rendered, and as you know, I can be quite an articulate person. I was rendered incapacitated to verbalize, to speak. I'd start stuttering over my words, or I just couldn't capture the things in the way that I wanted to say it. And what can be even more painful, it's a bit like standing in front of a glass door, seeing yourself on the other side of that glass door, struggling. So you're now not just experiencing the struggle, you're witnessing yourself struggling. And you're witnessing yourself as an adult who's now judging yourself as an adult, who's saying, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? Why are you having this problem? And then you try and work it out. And your point about, you went and tested out the material to see what it was like and what you thought about it. I've also tried different therapies in the past. And there was only one person I came into contact with that was actually able to run through some processes with me to really, it didn't clear it, but it took the
edge off.
It took the strength, or I wasn't completely immobilized now. I wasn't frozen.
Well, and that's just
I was starting to free that up.
Right. So any type of energetic healers, they're not here to heal the trauma. They're here to help ease you into being able to heal your own trauma. And so when we talk about guided meditation, Reiki, any type of energetic or quantum healing, we're not
here releasing the resistance in the body, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's just releasing the energetic resistance so that you have a clearer flow, or that you can articulate in a different way, or you might open you might open the adjacent door that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, to begin to walk that new pattern. And so I think we've talked about this a few times, that you're a visual, so you can hang yours up on a line and look at the trauma. And I'm a feeler, so I can go through each chakra and feel a trauma or not feel a trauma. And so it's like, I know my root chakra still has trauma in it, and my sacral chakra still has trauma in it. And so those are the two main ones I really go back and forth and work deeper levels inside of.
And actually humanity, in terms of on a more bigger scale, the root chakra is for a lot of people, hasn't it?
It is. The root chakra is a massive chakra that people have.
That's our safety, security, our groundedness in earth, which is why a lot of people trip out, disassociate, or can't cope with being here, because it's the very essence of our capacity to land.
To land. Yeah. To land on solid ground. Or ground that's not going to break you. So I know with the types of traumas I had been through, it was a lot of the root and sacral. So when I listened to a trauma-based meditation, I should be feeling some movement in there because I'm a feeler. And when I'm not feeling any movement, I know it's not, for me personally, doing the job I needed to do.
Well, what you're indicating really beautifully is that it's horses for courses. So there are different approaches for people at different phases of their life. Because when I was in the midst of that toxic situation, I could have had the most brilliant, transformative person come into contact with, but I was still not 24/7, but I was, because I was in my head then most of the time. In that toxic situation. So sometimes the environment, you have to remove yourself from the environment and have to get out.
And that's beyond just the work thing. You know, I had a group of friends that I was with for a long time, and it was like every time I felt close enough to kind of give some information on the trauma, it would, like a day or two later, I would literally be getting text messages about it from a completely different source. And so removing myself from that situation as a whole, as that whole community, I should have done long time before it hit.
I could equally say the same with my job. I could have walked out there sooner, but I don't know why. But we do what we do when we're ready to do it.
We do what we do when we're ready to do it. And whenever enough is when you make the decision. Exactly. And so, but I think that when you are talking trauma and we're trying to understand how to receive the magic or the love or the universe talking back, right? Whenever it's to keep your eyes open. And if something sits weird with you, like, wait, that's different. Pay attention to it, right? That's it. Like, okay, so everybody walks through and it's like, oh, 11:11. I see that all the time, but they don't put any like thought into why you're seeing 11:11. What are your thought patterns during that time? Like, you see a number that's consistent with a syncing to what it is that you are, what you are trying to align to, and you keep running across a specific number. I'm just going to keep using 11:11. Then what am I thinking about during that time? Right? What were my thought process? What was I doing at that time? So I look at 11:11 and I'm like, oh, I'm having a negative thought pattern. And I know that 11:11 is like a portal number, right? It's just an open number for you to walk into the next stage. So if I'm thinking a negative thought pattern, it immediately takes me out of the negative thought pattern, because I already know I'm opening up a space that I shouldn't be in. And even if it holds no merit, there's zero merit to any of these synchronizing numbers. I have already taught myself through using this number to stop the negative thought. So I'm looking at 11:11 and I'm over here. Why? Woe is me. Why? Oh, we're not doing that.
So that's the security guard again, isn't it?
That's that security guard.
Hang on a minute, mate.
Ma'am.
What are you doing? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or what are you doing? Hold off. Don't go there. Don't walk through that door.
Right. Don't do that. You go put down the bag.
Don't do that. Stop doing that. Why are you doing that?
Exactly.
You've got 18. Well, no, according to Mel Robbins, you've got 5 seconds to shift. So, and again, that's it takes a while sometimes to harness, because we can all learn this stuff. It's a bit like we can all learn what the best foods are and then we go and eat the same thing anyway. We can learn this stuff, but it's about how we learn it enough so that we think about it at the time we need to. So if I'm waking, it doesn't happen to me often now, but it used to happen all the time. If I woke up and a negative stream of thoughts had come into my head, and it did every morning when I was in the previous in that job, then I would have to capture that. I'd have to be in the practice. So I had to purposefully practice the tools until the tools just came.
But to go back to what you said so brilliantly, it takes time to master. Things take time to master. And I am a firm believer that everybody has the opportunity to become an ascended master in this lifetime. You have the capability of mastering yourself and the understanding of others in this lifetime that would make you an ascended master. It's not this scary beyond you thing that it's been made up to be. Like, you can be a master in your own realm, period.
And mastery is, if we go back to your experience as a photographer, what did they say with photography? It takes about 10,000 pictures before you are really like good
An
at
actual,
your game.
yeah. And how long
Yeah.
does it take to
So you've
even get out
mastered.
of, auto mode and go into a manual mode where you have
Yeah.
to set the settings every time you take the shot because the sun changes.
And
Uh,
yeah, and getting
but
into manual mode is clunky initially, isn't it?
it is. It's weird, and it takes you too long, and you're shooting overexposed
Yeah.
pictures or
Sun's
underexposed
got in by the
pictures.
time you get the right. Oh gosh,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm there
yeah,
at the moment trying to master
yeah.
manual mode. Yeah. And then we can master some things and then realize we've got to another part of the journey
And
and we're
that's
back to
exactly
being a novice
what you
again.
should be doing. That's what you should master something and then move forward to
And
master
then move
something else, and then
forward.
move forward to master something else.
Yeah.
And you'll find it that you'll be able to use these tools that you used to master these other things into your this new pattern you're walking to master something else. It takes time, and it feels like it's daunting and there's no end to it, but there's an end to things. Nobody's asking you to be perfect. We're just asking you to master your skill sets, and we all come equipped with a great tool set that we just need to learn how to activate and use. And that's part of the mastery. And if you just focus on yourself, the way you do this person that's saying this negative thing, or this boss that's making you feel inadequate, or this relationship that maybe isn't fulfilling you the way you want it to, if you just stop and really start focusing on mastering yourself in it, everything starts to fall into place, be it because you've now empowered yourself enough to walk away, or you've empowered yourself enough to stand there and say, I deserve better, we deserve better, let's do better. And that
Yeah.
takes time, but if you focus on yourself the way we do all these external things, we will be mastering in certain aspects of our life within a year. And although a year sounds like a lot of time, we live what is the average age, like 80? So out of 80 years, it took you 1 year to master calmness.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, there's when you're in it, and we've said this before, there was a time I remember, and this is going right back to when my first son was born, where I didn't know any different. I didn't know the world could look different, but I knew the way that I was feeling most of the time wasn't a way that I wanted to feel. The
right.
idea of living a life like that was a life not living, you know.
Exactly.
And then I remember getting, so roll forward 20 years. Now, life mostly, like you say, we have ups and downs. And I'd got to the stage where, there were far fewer incredible downs and just down moments, as
Right.
most of us have. And I remember them being in the work situation. And my thought process was based on the reality I could see, the corner of the world that I was in. And
Right.
I was thinking one of the reasons that stopped me leaving was because the role that I had at the time were roles that had been created, and then sometimes the government go through phases where things don't exist anymore. I couldn't see where I was going to go next. I couldn't, it
Right.
wasn't even like I looked in the job market and thought, oh yeah, I can do that, because I knew I didn't want to go back to some of the things I've been doing, but I thought that was the only choice. And I think this is the thing that grips quite a lot of us. So I was looking out there and thinking, well, what am I going to do? Who am I going to work for? What? And I actually thought there was nothing. I'm going to be, that's it. I'm stuck.
Right.
You can feel stuck and you can feel immobilized. And then one day, because I think you're the same as well, is I have to practice what I preach. I have to show that I can get the results
I
from,
have to walk that talk.
have to walk it. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
sat back one day because like I said, I wasn't practicing yoga anywhere to the degree that I am now. But I was sat on my bed and I'd been practicing these mantras just to survive, not to thrive.
Yes.
And then I sat there and I thought, right, I'm making a decision. And I just switched my thinking to, I'm now putting it out to the universe that I'm leaving, and I
Right.
decided to leave. And then the ideas about how to go about that process kicked in. And within a month, I was out. And by the end of the month, somebody had already approached me. I hadn't even looked for the job. Had already approached me with a job that was on the table.
Right.
Now, call that luck, call that whatever. But the thing is I had to switch the mindset.
The mindset. Well, and you can call it luck or whatever, but I mean, if science is proving that the law of attraction is real, how much luck is involved whenever we are living in a reflective universe where what you put out
and a
is what you
universe
get
that
back.
is a constant flow, and we shift our reality from moment to moment.
Well, the last job I left, I needed to go. It was very, I mean, like I was being picked on. I was being singled out. I was being picked on. Everybody was too afraid to say anything in front of anybody. They would always come up to me afterwards and be like, what was that? I'm like, say something. You know, like he's not listening to me. I stayed because my husband kind of guilt tripped me into staying, because at this time I was too sensitive. I was feeling too much. I was reading too much into things, but I knew my truth. And I remember one day I had enough and I said, you know what? I don't care if you want me to keep this job or if it's got the perfect hours or the perfect schedule. The reality is it's killing me. It's killing me very slowly. And I cannot take one more day of this. And it's like something happened where the person I was training who had no experience was getting paid more than me. And so that was it. That was the final line for me. Like, that's disrespectful. And so
it's usually a thing, isn't there, like that?
Yeah.
That is like, this is the last straw.
That's the last straw. Like, I'll put up with your shit, but you start paying somebody that's never had this experience and I'm training them more than me. Now we have a real issue, because
that's
now
where your self-value kicks in.
Yeah. You're devaluing me. And so I just remember going up to my husband and just saying, that's it. I'm done. Like, there's no more trying to convince me otherwise. I can't take this anymore. It's killing me. I have a game plan, and I had a game plan set up. I was taking on my photography career. I knew I had what it took. And I knew if I sat my focus on that and not on all of the things going on, that I was going to make it. And it changed everything. Just being ready, just saying, I choose me.
Trust.
Yeah. I'm ready to choose me. I'm not ready to choose. I'm not choosing everything else outside of me. I'm now choosing myself.
Isn't it so loving when a partner just wants you to stay in something that is killing you slowly? It's fascinating.
Well, you know, the thing is I don't think he realized the levels it was reaching, because we were not communicating effectively then.
Right.
And so I think what he was seeing was the version of Danielle that had hit her limit. That, you know, as you said, bring in you've been gone to the store for 5 minutes to go pick up a can of biscuits. And then I'm at the, waiting for you at the door, ready to explode. I'm already at explosion level whenever we sit down to have a conversation.
You were topped up all the time.
Exactly. So this is the version of me he's thinking I'm bringing into work. This is the version of me he thinks I'm having.
Right. Okay. So he's thinking that this is so this is why you're having problems, because you're attitude all the time.
But he doesn't see that I'm sitting there doing exactly what I was told to do, and then told it wasn't right. And then they explain it to me and it's the exact thing I'm doing. You see what I mean? And so like he's not seeing like picking me out of the lineup and saying what a terrible employee I've been. And here's why, in front of my group of, at the manager meeting where we're all sitting there with the other managers, he's not seeing like the picking me apart and then saying, in front of everybody, you need to write this on the calendar. But when I write it on the calendar, then that's not the correct way to write it on the calendar. It's like just the picky pick. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And so,
and that's the thing, isn't it? It's quite hard to convey to people around us those what look like very minor indiscretions that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis as to why they're so powerfully
they add up.
They add up.
They add up.
Away, because I was a very confident professional. I had really good relationships with a lot of people, and it didn't take long to chip away at that
and make me start to look around the people I'm working with and like, are you an enemy? Are you a foe? Because I feel like you're a foe, because if this were to ever happen, and here goes back to my trauma responses, if this were to ever happen to you, I would have stood up for you. I would have said, that's not okay to do. I would have put myself in between the shit. And now here you are just allowing this person to verbally assault me in front of everybody and not saying, well, we actually were the ones that decided that. Or we're the ones that put that into action, not Danielle. You just let me take it. So I feel like you're now a foe and not a friend. And so it was just like, it just got worse and worse until finally I decided to choose myself. And in choosing myself, I left.
That was a change in decision, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it really changed a lot of things. That's when I really got into my photography. That's when I started to afford, doing well enough to get the studio and really, taking that path to a successful place for me. I needed that path. I needed to show that I could be successful on my own, for myself, and not have, somebody in my ear telling me all the things that are wrong with me or perceived wrong with me, because those things were silly. The things I was being nitpicked apart were like, I remember having a job once where the lady came in, it was a district manager, and I was like the GM of something, and she came in, just picked me apart, just kept telling me I'm not smiling enough, questioned my clothing choices, why my hair was pulled up the way it was. Wow. And I was like, am I a model? Am I on TV? Because I can look at you and pick you apart as well. And maybe you should smile more on the inside and you wouldn't be such a bitch to me. When we're in the middle of these traumatic things, there doesn't look like there's adjacent possibilities.
They're not the qualities of a great leader
they're not. Right. Which is what made me a better leader. I'm a better leader because I don't want to be that leader, and I don't want to act like that leader. And that is not a leader. And but when you're in the middle of all this, you're not seeing the adjacent possibilities that are all around you. You think that this is the only route that you can take because you're not choosing yourself. You're not choosing what's best for you. You're choosing what's best for the economy, or what's best for maybe, how I afford this house, or what puts food on the plate, or maybe I'm choosing this because there might not be another position like this available around me.
And I think it's all those thought processes that kick in, isn't it?
I call them excuse processes, but yeah.
Well, at the time they're very real, though.
They're very real, but they're still at the very baseline of it. We're giving ourselves reasons why we're not enough, or why we don't deserve more.
Yeah.
And so it's just, and we can believe Bruno.
And we can really believe it. But I think just like the course that I'm, planning on running, is the gap that opens up is when you're at point B. A, and you want to get to point B, which is a different option. The transition between the two, it can bring all those fears in. You can be flooded with the fears and all the thought processes and all the feelings. And the moment and again, going back to your point earlier, you can either choose to look at, was it the wolf, the dark elements. We can choose to listen to all the reasons and the fears and everything that kicks in. What if I don't get a good job? What if they don't like me there? What if this? What if that? Or we can choose to go to the other side of things. And luckily I'd got to a phase in my life because, I have always had a active mind that can produce all sorts of nonsense.
I wouldn't call what you produce nonsense, but continue.
Well, not helpful stuff.
Not helpful. I understand.
Yeah.
Things that are keeping you looping in the same circle, and not
in the same
spiraling.
Negative, limited spirals of worry and distress. Rather than going into the state of mind, which moves you into a place of trust, because you've got to trust yourself you can do it. You've got to trust yourself that you can mobilize yourself and take action and look for something. And it can be quite difficult if you're not quite sure what it is, because I knew I didn't really want to do what I was doing, but I had no idea of what the other opportunities were. But then I realized, and this is the thing, and lots of people have really jumped on the law of attraction bandwagon, so it's put a lot of people off. But I think the process is that it's not about deciding what it is that you think's going to happen, is you start to focus on the things that bring you that joy that you enjoy, or the elements of work that you like, and the elements of work that you don't. And at some stage, just by making that decision, then those choices can start to open up, or magical things like bees landing on your pad.
Exactly. And we're also conditioned to stay at the same job until we retire, right? We've been conditioned that it's
cultural conditioning.
Exactly. That it's unhealthy of you to want to choose.
You're not really
you're not
a person if you don't.
They look at your resume and they're like, you've had 5 jobs in 10 years. They have questions now. And I'm like, well, treat me like shit and I leave, So, but I think that when at the end of the day, at the bare bones of it all, you have to begin to choose what's best for you. You have to point the arrow, let it land where it's going to land. and then start taking the steps to align yourself. And I don't care if the law of attraction has become this, little, cliche line, the fact that that science is proving it to be true, and the negative aspect only tells you that it's true in the positive aspect, that, we have to begin to be less fearful and more trusting. I have literally lived an entire existence up until 2 years ago
in fear,
being told not to trust myself. Yes. Verbally being told that I should not trust myself, that all of these thoughts and these intuitive guidances I had were wrong. And I still managed to find faith in myself. So I know this is quite possible. I know that without a doubt, based on the experiences I've had, and we're talking from the earliest childhood until 2 years ago, and I just turned 40, okay, that if I have been taught the opposite my entire life, and I decided to do the opposite, which was believe in myself a little bit, my entire world changed. My entire existence changed. Now, I quit my job about 4 years ago, but even in that moment, the level of empowerment I received by telling that person, what you're doing is not okay. And so here's your choice. And I gave my first ultimatum to a job, which was, you either pay me the same amount, if not a little bit more, or I'm walking out. And so she told me I was being disrespectful for asking. So I said, well, then here's my notice. And to be empowered in that way by choosing myself. And then 2 weeks later, she announced to everybody that they were going bankrupt and kicked everybody out of the job, and then didn't pay them their last paycheck. So my intuition was spot on. I knew she was bad news bears. I knew she wasn't in it for anything but herself and a tax write-off, because her husband was a financial advisor. So that if a failing business is lasting longer than it should, that there's a reason. So, but
that's an interesting point that you bring up as well, though, because one of the things that I didn't realize was going on at the company I was at. Now, I'd worked there. I'd enjoyed the job for a long time. I'd worked in the same authority, but at different roles for a long time. So we're only talking about the transition sort of because we moved into a different private business in the last year. So we were being told by HR and our new bosses, they've got this vision and they're going to do this, do that. We didn't realize behind the scenes, they brought in externals, the cutthroat crew, to just slice people off. Yep. So even on paper, you see, and this was the thing, was we were, and again, it's this sort of contradictory message you get as a kid, we find ourselves in as adults, is on paper it looked, or verbally they were saying, we want to work with you, we've got this vision, we want to turn things around, things haven't been great for a while, but we're transitioning into this business, come with us on this journey, blah blah blah. And I'm all for that. I'm all for changing the way our service operates, integrating staff in a different way. I was flowing with the ideas. I wasn't against it. I wasn't resisting. Right. However, the meat cleaver stuff was going on behind the scenes, you see. And I started, just like your point with your intuition, we had a room in the building that we worked in where we would go and have meetings, and they used to draw, actually it was blatantly obvious at some stages, they would draw like these consultation plans that they'd had with us. And I started to notice that every week I went in this room that different people's names were disappearing off these plans. And then I started to realize who was getting sliced first and who was probably going. So I think that the deeper part of me was seeing that that I was possibly, even though I couldn't, believe it at all, but I was possibly going to be one of those people that were going to, because I was like middle management at the time.
Yes, they put fear in you. They were like, if you notice this, you're going to be fearful, and then they put it in a place that people will notice it.
Yeah, or it's another sort of method to just, wake people up to some of the hard truth without articulating it. And then landed me as with one of the, I don't know, consultation number 5 or something. I can't remember how many we had. We had a lot. With then offering me a job that just And I think, you know, you like what you're saying, you get to a stage sometimes, don't you, where what somebody does or what they say is so insulting or out of the blue or whatever, it just motivates you to turn around and instantly just go,
Yeah.
no, I don't think so. And that was one of the other defining moments, because they'd offered me something that I'd allowed myself to temporarily feel into,
Right.
when my system was going, no.
You don't deserve that. Yeah.
No, do you want to? And I think the biggest crux of it is that we were actually going to move the whole of our team, and we were going to be sat in a police station. I'd never wanted to work in that environment, you know. So there are some environments that if somebody says to you, can you work there tomorrow, for all the money under the sun, you might not, you know, unless lesser of other reasons.
Right.
To do that. So yeah, there are different factors, going back to the point we started with earlier on.
Yeah.
The environment can create
Exactly.
information and
Yeah.
signposts and flags
And it
that
can, and
says,
that's in every department. That I know we're just talking about work, but it
yeah,
happens within friends.
life,
It happens
friends,
with your significant other. Say you're in any, and we don't. And when I talk
yeah,
abuse, I don't mean just the physical form. Emotional
yeah,
abuse is a
yeah,
very real thing, and you know, the signposts are there, and we have to be in a position within ourselves, because this is what this really comes down to, is it
yeah,
being trusting yourself and guiding yourself to know that those signs are indicative of something that's on the
that's off.
horizon for you.
Yeah,
And then if you're
yeah.
not paying attention to those horizon signs, all of a sudden it's daybreak and you're on that horizon, and here it
They get
comes.
stronger, gets louder, or
And
you
yeah,
think, yeah, or you've
so
been
we've
caught
talked
off
about,
guard.
you know, I kind of touched on this once, where we talk about certain things, and I call it the demons. When we talk about Christianity and demons, I really think that they're just materialized
Yeah,
thought patterns or materialized signs that you weren't paying attention to. So now the demon arrives, right? Now the demon's like, hi, my name is, or hey, this
yeah,
part is
the
going to
Grim
happen.
Reaper that's come along that says you're
Yeah.
finished here, mate. Yeah. And
Yeah.
nobody wants to get to that stage, but like you're saying, if you don't see the signs, and so what was blocking me seeing the signs, I was now quite removed from my authentic peaceful self, because I was
Mm-hmm.
stressed and in overwhelm. When you're in stress and overwhelm, you're confused, you're overwhelmed, you don't necessarily make the right
Right. Well, you're
healthy
in survival
decisions.
mode,
You're
and
in
you're doing what it takes to survive, not thrive. I heard that. What was that? Well, that was pretty funny. I've been noticing that you and I keep having these technical difficulties whenever we're in the middle of a subject. And this
yes.
happens to be a crying, whatever that is. It doesn't sound like a fox on my side.
It sounds like a fox with asthma that's extremely irritated,
It's
but
very,
I've
it's
no
called a
idea.
lot. Yeah, that sounds uncomfortable. Sounds
It's a bit
uncomfortable.
freaky. I mean, tonight it's at a reasonable time. That noise has gone off. I haven't heard it for a while, at like 3 o'clock in the morning in the past, and woke me up, and it's been squealing for ages. So
Yeah.
it's a bit disturbing.
It is. And so I did want to touch on, you know, these positive influences that we have
Mm.
when we're in the middle of trauma, that sometimes we,
Yeah, that would help my heart rate go
yeah,
down.
we don't see, you know, for me, it's getting out into nature. Now, I don't want you getting out in nature right now because it's dark and you have a screaming,
Okay.
you have a screaming demon out there. So,
Yeah, I'm
but
staying indoors.
some kind of weird banshee going on. But one of the things that I fought myself really hard on when I was in the middle of depressing, lower vibrational, traumatic, anything that brings you out of alignment with who you are, right?
Like
Would be
that.
getting in, yeah, exactly. Would be getting into nature.
Yeah.
I would deny myself this free exchange of healing energy. And you know, again, I always go back to science, because I think that a lot of the things that we talk about have a lot of scientific backing to it. And you know, it's not so frou when you're talking spirituality, when you know that there's science behind it. Now, grounding scientifically works. We've talked, they've proven the ions and the negative ions and how it recharges and it helps dissipate. And, so not everybody has this obvious choice of going out barefoot into their own grass. People live in apartment complexes, people live in the middle of downtown areas. Like, this isn't always possibility. However, getting into nature is always a possibility. All you have to do is step outside your front door.
Yeah.
And just start paying attention to the things that aren't man-made, right? So there's always a patch of grass somewhere. There's always a tree somewhere. The sun is always somewhere. There's always going to be a cloud or a sky that you can take a look at. There's the moon. There's always going to be a bird flying around. Birds like to go everywhere. They're not limited to just the country. They're flying downtown. They like the food. And so, there's all of these things that we deprive ourselves from whenever we're sitting inside of these deeper negative thought patterns or in these crisis like situations that make us feel like there's no end in sight, that could be a positive turnout. When I put myself into nature and I started doing things like sitting on my front porch or even being inside and potting a plant and allowing yourself to have some house plants, or watching the birds outside of a window, or going and sitting under a tree, or going by a body of water. These are very healing and conducive to opening chakras that we don't understand yet energetically. But you can't tell me a person that doesn't go out into nature, and even if there's mosquitoes out there and it's annoying, that they don't receive some type of energetic feed back into them that's of a positive nature. And whenever we are going through these types of situations, the more you can get yourself outside or dealing with things that come from nature, potting plants or watering a plant, that these things can really, petting an animal helps, being around things that activate this higher sense of love inside of you that is not conditioned or expectation involved. You will really begin to feel the changes inside of you before you can, before you even realize it. You're in a calmer state of mind, you're in a calmer state of being. And whenever you're dealing with any type of traumatic situation, the more you can put yourself into a natural place, the more of a natural place you're going to end up in on the inside as well.
I think some of the things that have shown through the research as well is that because that involves movement, and rather than being in a frozen state or static,
right,
is that the movement itself is what enables the body to release. So it's a bit like, when you see an animal shaking something off if they've been frightened or or had to move out of a situation quickly, is they'll shake that off. It's almost like we need to do that as well. And sometimes if you haven't learned how to do it, you have to instigate
teach
that.
yourself. Yeah. It's about teaching yourself that you matter and that you are important enough to take care of. And, I can tell you right now, running a bath was not even an option for me. I wouldn't sit in it, but I would go outside. And even if I might not sit in the grass, I would sit on the porch even if it was for 5 minutes. I would go sit in, the room with all my windows. We call it a Florida room or sunroom, and watch the birds outside. That calmed me. And what we do is somehow feel like we're unworthy. So we deprive ourselves of the most basic of necessities, especially when we're dealing in any type of traumatic experience, anything that causes a high level of stress. And we then take away from ourselves the things that would de-stress us. And a lot of times it is an unconscious thing. You don't mean to take away
You don't realize,
but if you just put yourself into a pattern with at least a few minutes a day, just making it a point to take care of yourself. And if that taking care of yourself is taking the shower or watering your plants or feeding the animals or letting the animals kind of be around you and petting them a little bit more than normal, or just go and putting your bare feet even on concrete helps. And instead of depriving yourself of it, start creating the pattern to allow yourself to have it. Because it requires you. It requires you making that decision, feeding that light wolf and
Yeah.
saying, this wolf is hungry for nature, so let's go out to nature. This wolf is hungry for a shower, let's go shower. This wolf needs something to look at and talk to, even if it's not going to talk back. Play with an animal. And I don't mean like your wild demon fox outside. I mean like a cat.
Yeah, I'm not going out there to stroke that one. I'm not sure how big
No,
it is yet. It looks about 12 foot tall. And that's the
metal.
things, isn't it? You know, often the things that you're scared of, or the demons or whatever, can look like they're 12 foot tall.
It's true. And that
Yeah.
they are impenetrable. But demons, you know, when we talk demons are there with purpose. And your dark side is there with purpose. And sometimes when we face these realities, these crisis situations, these deep depressions, these traumatic events, it's really life giving you this wake up call that you need to maybe align yourself to something that's more suited for who you are and what you represent, and not what's suited for what the conditioning of, you know, society, or, you know, is telling you what you should be doing, or the conditioning of your parents who are conditioned by society are telling you what to do.
Yeah.
You know, what your family and friends think of what you're doing is none of their business. And in that sense, if you want to work and you enjoy what you're doing, go do it, and do it wildly and happily. And if you are coming into situations that are not making you happy and not making that inner child come through, then it's really time to evaluate those before those become your issue internally. And then you're stuck in this revolving pattern of, I can't do anything right, or I'm not happy, or I'm not worthy of any of this. And it does, when enough is enough, you know. And we're here for whenever the enough is enough moment. That enough is enough. Here's your keys to taking that car and going on the road as far as you can, because you deserve this, and everybody deserves to have that enough is enough moment and make the change that they so deserve, to walk forward in this new pattern of living a life that you can be proud of, not a life that so and so can be proud of, or that your mom and dad can be proud of. It's a life that you can be proud of, something that you leave as a legacy. And not all of us are designed to work 9-to-5 jobs. Not all of us are designed to work with other people in that capacity. Go find the thing that sparks the joy and follow it incessantly. Do not stop following it. Maybe the joy changes. Follow that joy, but follow whatever brings you joy in the moment. And I don't mean negative joy. I don't mean fixing. I don't mean cover-ups. I mean the things that we imagine ourselves to be, the things that we imagine our life to be. Go and follow that. Yeah.
And it starts, I think sometimes it can start like it's a minute a day, or 3 things a week, or 5 things a week, or 5 hours a day, whatever that is. Consistency and focus will move you further into that zone, so that you can get to a place where you can sit outside a coffee shop and feel in complete flow and peace, and feel the sun and feel the sun on your on your face.
Because we deserve it. We are so deserving of this.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you and I found our path to getting to this level of freedom and happiness, and the reality that we create our own joy. And once you begin to create that joy, there's no turning back, because now you know the tools it takes. Once you know the magic ingredients, there's no way that you're going to stop putting into those ingredients,
because you start getting you start getting the results, and then that motivates and fires you up to do more of those things to get the results. And we
are so deserving of being happy. And if it's not happy, if all you can think of is peacefulness, then you're deserving of being peace. If all it is neutrality, you are deserving of the neutrality.
Exactly.
Whatever you find yourself longing to have, go and chase it. You deserve it. Just align as much as you can and cross your fingers and have the biggest faith in yourself and watch the magic happen, because it happens.
It does. And on that note, I think great conversation and topics, and what flows in and out of this. You know, we've sort of bounced between the light and the dark all the time, haven't we, on the call tonight. So thanks again, Danielle, for your time. And
thank you.
I look forward to when we do this again.
Me too. I always look forward to these. They're so much fun.
Yeah, they are. They're great. They unfold in each moment, don't they?
Yes, exactly. And until